Welcome to our Nation State Dialogue. राष्ट्र राज्य संवाद श्रृंखला में आप सबका स्वागत है. I'm Dr. Geeta Kochar, moderator for today's discussion. Today we have a privilege to invite His Excellency Dr. Dilip Raj Khanal from Nepal. He is a former member of the Parliament and Nepal National Planning Commission. He is one of the senior economists in Nepal. After his PhD in 1986, he has been continuously engaged in research, teaching, and social works. He is teaching advanced macroeconomics to the research scholars at the Central Department of Economics, Tribhuvan University, since the inception of the program in 2008. He also guides international political economy to the PhD scholars at the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy, Tribhuvan University. He is the founder chairman of the Institute for Policy Research and Development, established in 1995, which is one of the think tanks in the field of socio-economic research. He has undertaken extensive research works on macroeconomy, international trade, finance, financial crisis, industry, labor market, social security, employment, foreign aid, poverty, human development, and SDGs and related issues. He has also made pioneering contribution to the SAM-based modeling in Nepal. His recent works are mainly focused on political economy-related socio-economic transformation and prosperity issues. He has several books, policy papers, and reports individually as well as jointly to his credit. In 2017, his pioneer work was on the contemporary issues of global and Nepalese economy, mainstreaming the real policy agenda. His other works include Social Security Protection in Nepal, a situational study and analysis, 2012, Economic Integration in South Asia, Issues and Pathways, 2010, Aid Effectiveness under PRSP in Nepal, 2008, Understanding Reforms in Nepal, Political Economy and Institutional Perspectives, 2005, Macroeconomic Policies, Shocks and Poverty Reduction in Nepal, Simulation-Based Quantitative Analysis, 2005, Development Planning in Asia, 1993, Financing Public Sector Development Expenditure in Selected Countries, Nepal, 1988, Public Expenditure in Nepal, Growth Pattern and Impact in 1988, and many more works. So first of all, let me congratulate you for your work and contribution to Nepal. This is the right time to discuss issues with you, especially when Nepal is witnessing a revised demand for restoration of the monarchy, as people are disgruntled with the economic performance of the current government under challenging circumstances. So when we see, the COVID situation has changed the world in ways, especially the economic targets for growth and sustainability have all been missed. How do you see this will impact Nepal, which was already struggling with huge poverty and unemployment issues? Yes, sir.
Professor Geeta, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to share some of my views on the issues that rightly raised. Indeed, you are correct in saying that the COVID-19 that has made very adverse impact on multiple fronts, given the structure of the economy, given the nature of the economy, which is primarily remittances driven, at the same time, import induced consumption based economic activities that are taking place since many years, which are again grounded on the kind of dominant policy regime that many countries of South Asia, of course Nepal, that are pursuing. Because of that, the kind of the nature of the economy, also what has happened that the COVID has impacted growth, at the same time the unemployment, the poverty, the inequality, and in a way that the kind of some momentum that was taking place over time in terms of growth or overall growth performance, that has been disrupted. And more so, as I said, the nature of the economy, what has happened that most of the 4 or 5 sectors that have been badly affected. Of course, one is tourism, and then the construction sector, then the manufacturing sector, and then transport, and many others. And what has happened that preliminary estimate that showed that the growth rate will be in the last year, it will be in the neighborhood of 2.3%. But now the updated information and many national as well as international organizations, they forecast or predict that indeed growth. My one predictions also they indicate that growth has actually been either zero or negative. And because of the, employment generating and human development related sectors that have been, badly affected. That is why the unemployment, especially in Nepal, you might be noting that almost 85% of the people, they are in the informal sector. And estimates show that because of, laid off of the workers, at the same time, additionally, many wage levels that have been reduced. That has almost more than 2 million workforce, those who are engaged or employed, they are out of the job. At the same time, the wage rate has been cut in many sectors, and that has, had, very adverse effect on poverty. At the same time, the way the health sector, the way the education sector that has been affected, and equally, very adverse effect that has been on the gender dimension. The inequality might be that has perpetuated at a time when Nepal is, struggling with, in poverty intensity, at the same time higher unemployment, and even at the official level, the unemployment rate is estimated to be around 11.4%. If you adopt 2 million plus, then that directly, indicates that the poverty has, aggravated, at the same time affecting the livelihood of the people. That simply means that if you take into account in terms of overall impact, that the growth had is affected, and especially the sectors which absorb more labor force that have been badly affected, that has had, poverty, at the same time inequality, at the same time the gender effect has been equally very pervasive. Therefore, Nepal is facing, a kind of new challenge that has emerged because of COVID-19. Yes. Yes, please.
Yes, very rightly said. I mean, COVID-19 has faced, I mean, it has posed so many kind of challenges. We have laid off workers, the poverty has gone up. And I think even the return workers in Nepal is very high. I mean, the ones who were going out and settling down, and there was a lot of remittances coming. But I think the recent report that I was looking at was saying that the remittances have not gone down. So this is also one of the very interesting factor, considering, the other factors you are pointing out, like the tourism, the manufacturing, all have been hit hardly. We really need to look at that. But one of the main agendas of the Oli government was Samriddh Nepal and Sukhi Nepali. However, in recent months, there has been a lot of discussion and criticism of the failed economic policies of the Oli regime. So can you please elaborate and highlight the economic policies of the Oli government and the issues that are confronted now?
Actually, the COVID that has jolted the kind of initiatives that were taken, as you rightly mentioned, that when the Oli government, the first elected government after the implementation of the constitution, that was installed or that was formed, they set the agenda inconsistent with what we have stated in the constitution. At the same time, many goals that are stated in the SDGs, they are also consistent with, or the kind of theme or the frame that has been set, that is prosperous Nepal and happy Nepali, that underlines, many underlying, characteristics of the roadmap that has been set in constitution. At the same time, SDGs. In the beginning, at least what I can say, that there are 2 to 3 dimensions that have to be taken into account instead of generalizing everything. One is that when the government that came to the power, actually it was a kind of challenge for the, transition to federalism. Hundreds of new acts that had to be set. And there was almost vacuum, at least in the provinces. At the same time, almost, since decades, vacuum at the local level. Therefore, institutions, infrastructure, institutional setups, at the same time, administrative apparatus that had to be set, apart from, introducing various constitutions. That was done, and broadly, though there are some grievances or some shortcomings in the way the federal system that has been, introduced, or so to say, strengthened, there are certain lapses and problems. But initially, the one challenge that was on, how to go to the transition to the federal system, that has been broadly, completed. That is one positive aspect. At the same time, if you look into first 2 to 3 years growth rate, at least growth rate, that it was almost 7% on the average, and many sectors that were generating very robust growth. And also, if you look into, apparently, I always criticize the way the poverty is estimated in the context of Nepal and many parts of South Asian countries, that it is consumption poverty, at least. I always argue in favor of income poverty. What we see that, at least in terms of consumption poverty, poverty has declined. Now it has reduced to around 18%. That means certain positive direction or the pickup that was there. And above all, when I was citing Constitution and then the theme, that they tried to reorient the economy. That is, the economy which was remittance based, which was import driven, consumption based, and it was basically trade margin and then finance margin, the siphoning of resources to the haves, at the cost of have-nots, and that also more focused on the more urban areas, that sort of phenomenon, which was jobless type of growth, that they try to reorient the economy, as they stated or the committed during the election manifesto. That means we'll be replacing that sort of economic character or structure or feature of the economy by raising the productive capacity of the economy with a focus on agriculture and then industry, infrastructure, and many competitive sectors, which are like tourism, energy sector, and all that. At the same time, there was focus on social security protection, 1 or 2 programs that were additionally introduced, though Nepal is very popular, since, early UML government time, the social security, the elderly social security, protection system that is there, that was focused. But the problem, as you indicated, what happened that the COVID, the kind of growth, other performances that were there, that have been, completely disrupted. At the same time, what has happened that apparently the kind of reorientation focus, the structural institutional reforms, and the kind of policy reforms and targeting more excluded and focus on more employment, poverty, all that was there, at least, in terms of orientation or the focus. But the way that was, concretization, for instance, what you need, unless you have some, the kind of structural impediments, the kind of vulnerabilities that we see in our economy, the kind of concretizing what you have stated, that was not there. And apparently what happened that some sort of status quo approach that was continued, and more importantly, the kind of reforms in the governance system, the kind of responsive system that was essential. At the same time, focusing on more power, more responsibility to the provinces and the local government, that actually could not take place as expected. And that has some kind of resentment, frustration, you can say even anger, that gradually that is manifesting as we observe. And that simply means that government has to rethink what it has done so far. There are some lapses, problems. As I said, this although in terms of orientation, direction, the kind of thrust, if you see the 15th periodic plan and the kind of 2-3 budgets that Oli government that introduced, that focus is there, but there is complete mismatch between what you have stated and the kind of internalization and the concretizations in terms of structural reforms, institutional reforms, policy reforms, the kind of neoliberal orthodoxy that you are popularizing, that had to be changed, and more so in the governance system. Various, the check and balance type of institutions that had to be strengthened, and the corruption or leakages system that had to be controlled, that could not succeed. That is why some of the successes or the good performance that was there, that were overshadowed because of the the problem in the governance, delivery system and all that. Yes, please, Professor Gita.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to the point that, the economic performance that was before the COVID situation, if we see the, the GDP growth rate and things like that in Nepal, it was really going smooth. And I mean, as you are trying to say that there were institutional changes and the reforms that were taking place, which really had to, struggle with the kind of changes that were happening. So it is all encompassing that, there has been challenges. But one of the points that you really pointed out is in terms of the, consumption poverty and income poverty. So let me just take you to the same issue of poverty and talk about the next door neighbor, China, in some sense, which provides a model of rooting out poverty. Yet many of the developing countries and Asian neighbors cannot follow the path. So what are the differences you see in China and Nepal to root out abject poverty, considering both have communist powers in, communist governments in power, whether you look at China and Nepal?
No, it's a very pertinent question that you raised. Yes, apparently both are communist governments, but in terms of political structure, the kind of system that have, because we have democratic system, and there are, as you know, there are limitations. You have to balance, or that you have to have some sort of check and balance. There are various institutions. At the same time, what happens in a democratic or so-called Western democratic system, that the kind of path dependency syndrome that you have in the political institution, state institution, social institutions, and even in the political institutions, the kind of coalition, the kind of bargaining, this and that. Now, ultimately, it's a nexus with the kind of periodic elections that you conduct and the money power that it plays. That you have to confront with many those things in the democratic system, even if you are a leftist or communist government, and at the same time you have committed, as the present government has committed, to road to socialistic oriented economy, which impliedly means that you have to address the excluded, the working class, the poor. That means you have to directly or indirectly address the poverty context. What I see that in terms of the political system, state system, and the entire institutions, various institutions that play around, that is completely different. You have to pass through the democratic institutions, are where give and take, coalitions, bargaining that take place. That limitations are the constraints that you have. Therefore, you cannot impose the things unilaterally, the way Chinese system that can. They have additional strength on that. That is why, as I have personally visited one or two projects in China, how they target the poverty in particular county or particular area, and how they are succeeding. In the context of Nepal, though there are possibilities that the kind of mandate or the majority that people have given, and the kind of commitment that you have done to the people, if you, as I said in the previously, if you have a drive, and at the same time very robust working plan, action plan, in that the kind of at the three ties, who is responsible, and if the responsibility is not completed, then what will be the system of punishment and all that. If that is done in parallel, incentivizing I did not talk about the private sector previously. Actually, the kind of investment pattern that we see through the private sector, again, there are serious problems, as we see through banking system. For instance, that is partly true in case of India also. What we see that out of the total investment or the lending of the banking system, 55 to 60% that is confined to Kathmandu. At the same time, very limited houses they capture the kind of lending that has been made, and they try to confine on the areas where there is quick returns. For instance, trade, for instance, unproductive in real estate and other areas, shares and all that, which gives to quick return, and that is not consistent with the kind of productive transformation you are talking about, the kind of productive investment that you are talking about, and that probably is that constraint is also there. Therefore, what I am trying to say is that the in conjunction or in coordination or as a complementary way, the kind of various actors, agents, including private sector, that could keep mobilized and very robustly the kind of focus, in terms of program setup and in terms of implementation at 3 tiers that could be done. That such of as I previously said, concretization and implementation that could not be undertaken, and gradually what has happened that some sort of business as usual, where the dominant they prevail, as we know, the kind of institutional or other type of setups of the kind of production and social relations that are perpetuating over time, unless you bring certain breakthroughs, that breakthrough, the problem of breakthrough that I see, if I see from the political economy angle, though still there are possibilities of doing more, in reducing poverty, in generating employment, at the same time the kind of richness that you have in terms of resource endowment and all that, that possibility is there. There are some problems or some missing opportunities that I see today. Yes.
No, well said. But let me just move into the other neighbor, which is also problematic, as we are seeing the strained relations, but which are being forced to be revived in certain fashions. But there are certain misconceptions, misunderstandings that have taken place between India and Nepal. So talking about India and Nepal, and while we are seeing that there is a new thrust being given on rebuilding relationships, focusing on economic development and connectivity projects, how do you see the future of this relationship, and what are the areas that need to be focused on? Because sitting at New Delhi and looking at India's position, and you being one of the former members of the parliament in Nepal, I think you're the right person to be questioned about how do you want this relation to be developed further, and what are the areas that need to be really focused so as to build better ties between India and Nepal?
I'm not going, the earlier experiences or all that. What I see, as you rightly said, that is rebuilding, the confidence and the rebuilding the relationships. That should be the proper word. What I see that since August, as I was going through, various events and the kind of meetings and the secretary level meetings and the kind of development up to now that I see from August to this period, I see some positive developments are there. And the focus now has been, there are 8 to 9 area, 9 to 10 area, at least I was seeing the list, 23 to 24, projects and programs that have been picked up. And there are I should add, there are 2 to 3 problems. One is that still there is trust deficit. The way, the border dispute, despite the, long dispute, and, the platform that we have, through various committees, that the unilateral decision that was made by India, that, to some extent offended. But in that also some sort of, I should add, the kind of provocation that in Indian media or even some allied groups also, without going into the reality. Simply many, they lamented, or they just asked that it was China provocated and all that. Is nothing to do with, the kind of, because the dispute, that the question has been raised by Nepal since long. Therefore, the kind of unilateral, steps or move that was, by India, that has really offended Nepal. And now, albeit, that perception or the various, moves that have changed. At the same time, you might be noticing that even the eminent person report, which was jointly, um, the entire, many months, many years that were taken, and various issues that were addressed through that report, that was based on some sort of consensus. But even the consensus, driven report, that has not been accepted or received by Indian authorities, officially. That I think in 2-3 fronts that have to be worked out simultaneously. One is that in order to strengthen or enhance the trust, recover, so to say, the trust deficit, I think more high level, meeting that should take place, at least at the foreign minister level, and then the prime minister level. That should be there. One. Second, India and Nepal should sit together based on historical evidences, without any biases, historical evidences, to settle the border dispute, open-heartedly. That should be second. And the third, of course, is that as Nepal also, at this time, Nepal is facing additional difficulties because of the COVID, and the kind of huge resources, or the kind of investment that is required, and the kind of in order to address the kind of frustration that we see from the political economy angle, that more generous support from countries like India, which is supporting Nepal since long, that is required. And there are many sectors or areas that have been already set, and some are in the pipeline. In that also, what I see, third, and which is critically important, that the kind of, you might have noticed, is that there is just a tendency of just holding the projects. If you look into, that is true in case of Tarai, Hula Post, or Tarai Road, that is true in case of cross-border road, that is true in case of transmission lines, and many others. There is even the reconstruction, the commitment that were made, the reconstruction because of the devastating impact of earthquake. There also the kind of promptness that was essential for releasing the committed funds, that could not take place. Therefore, one of the problems that many people in Nepal, they have some reservation, is that the commitments that are not actually concretized and implemented, just holding, and that in terms of effects or implications, that hurts socioeconomic development, at the same time in terms of opportunity cost also. If you hold one project, and then that will have in terms of opportunities to very larger negative impact in the medium to long term. And therefore, third point that I want to emphasize is that in order to rebuilding trust, in order to rebuilding relationships, as very recently there are new commitments that have been made, that the kind of projects are on the pipeline, or that are under construction, that will be expedited. That should be in action, not only in terms of commitments. Third. And fourth, of course, and as a student of economics, what I say, that if you look into the trade relation between Nepal and India, and that has been always unequal trade relations, or in a way we can say that the trade deficit of Nepal with India is very large. it is widening over the years. Only last fiscal year, because of the COVID, that was certain slowdown. Otherwise, the gap is widening. What I see that now the time has come to renew trade and transit treaty, in that the trade deficit, the underlying reasons why there is alarming trade deficit over time that is taking place, that has to be looked into, and some sort of joint efforts, in terms of industry, establishment, or a kind of strategy that enhances or ensures that the trade deficit over time that is reduced. The time has come. As you see in 1990s, mid 1990s, as people say, Gujarat Doctrine, that period, that was historical, type of, agreement, trade agreement between Nepal and India, that was in 1990. There were clauses where there was no any reciprocity provision, that there were almost free access of Nepalese, manufactured products to India. But somehow there were some problems in Nepal also, that was discontinued. But what I'm saying is that one of the areas that will strengthen rebuilding of relationship, or rebuilding or enhancing or removing the trust deficit, that is that the trade and transit issue also be looked into from new perspective. Yes, yes.
No, well said. I mean, the trade and transit probably is one of the areas that really need to be looked into. But I mean, you have been constantly talking about this trust deficit, which still exists. So my last, question to you is: what are your suggestions to build India-Nepal ties that can really help both the commons and people in the long run, in terms of rebuilding the trust, and the people that are, especially the Nepalese, who are not very happy with the kind of delay in projects and things like that. So what is just your concrete suggestions? And the last question to you is, you think that it really can help both the government and the people?
Probably I said many things, the kind of many issues that I already discussed. But what I say additionally is that the trust building at the elite levels, at the academia level, at the people to people level, and the kind of sometimes, as I said, provocation or misleading type of information that are done, that very badly damages the perception of the people, both countries' perception of the people, in terms of dissemination, and in terms of propagating, so to say, that some sort of positiveness that should be. But ultimately, more and the most important thing, that at the political level, some sort of trust, that should be addressed. At the same time, areas, as one of the right steps that has been taken, you might have noticed, that the business forum, for example, it has been decided that business forum that will be established and pursued further, and that sort of various only people to tell people, connecting type of forums that are set up, and at the same time some positive propaganda or the perception that is disseminated, responsive, at the political level, at the government level, at the media and the academia level. If that could be started in a new way, probably a sort of deficit or the damage that was made, that could be recovered, and we could move, in a very better way, in the sense that, again, the relation will be strong. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I fully agree. At the political level, when there is will, the positive vibes would spread in both the countries. So the political will has to be at both the Indian government level as well as the Nepal government level. And these positive vibes would spread into multiple areas, whether it is business or academia or people to people. And our, long heritage of cultural and, historical ties, which whereby we are linked together, can never be rooted out. So, I mean, a small, problem or a few years of misunderstanding or mistrust can really not break this relationship. So thank you very much, Dr. Diliraj Khanalji, for these insights and an interesting discussion. It was a pleasure to hear you. Thank you for all watching our episode. We hope to continue our conversations. Keep watching and keep learning. Dhanyavad.